Welcome to the Therapist HQ, your weekly pep talk for private practice pros. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to the Therapist HQ. My name is Alicia Murray, and as always, I am so glad that you are here spending this time with me. Today, we are getting into something that I have been wanting to talk about for a while now, and honestly, something that I wish someone maybe had unpacked with me before I made the leap into private practice. We are going to be talking about fear, specifically my fears. All of them, the ones that I had going into private practice that I didn't really talk about out loud, at least not at first, but we're here talking about them now. And here's why I think that this episode is so important for people, whether you are first starting out in your practice or you've maybe been in your practice, but maybe you're looking to add things to your practice, add additional services, additional revenue streams. I talk to therapists all the time who are sitting on the edge of making the move into private practice or into additional things in their practice. And they are still carrying some of these sort of like original fears with them. And what I notice with working with them is that the fears don't really go away just because we're not talking about them. But we're all therapists. We know this, right? They tend to just get louder or take up more or different space. And if whether we know it or not, they may even be impacting the decisions that we're making. And again, as therapists, we know that we definitely don't want to be making decisions out of fear. But when we are in the epicenter of our business and our practices and being a therapist, sometimes it's hard to sort of look up and see around and see that maybe we are engaging in this. Maybe we are making decisions based out of fear, right? Even these long standing fears. So today we are going to do something a little bit different. We are going to name these fears, pick them apart, and hopefully by the end of the episode, I want you to have a tool that you can actually use. It's just a fear inventory. Again, I'm sure everyone is quite familiar. So you can do this with your own fears, whatever they may be. Because here is what I do know to be true is that fear is not a sign that you're not ready. The fear is usually just a sign that this is something that is really important to you. Those are two very different things, right? And so we want to make sure that we are able to distinguish between the two and make sure that what is driving our motivation and our decision making is rooted in the right things. All right, let's get into it. So before I started my private practice, I, like everybody else, had very real fears. And it went beyond the what if this doesn't work, which I think is also a very common fear. I mean, for me personally, it was like, late at night, early in the morning, this might actually cause me to stop working towards the opening of my practice sort of fears. And for a long time, I didn't talk about them because I thought that having them meant that it was something wrong with me in terms of, unchecked imposter syndrome or feeling like maybe I was lacking clinically or I was lacking in the right business knowledge. Like, if I were really so cut out for this, why would I be having so many of these fears? But the more therapists that I talk to and I work with and I surround myself with, the more I realize that the fears I had are almost universal. Almost everyone who has made this leap has had some version of the same ones. So I want to walk you through mine, not to really exploit myself here, but because I think that there is something really powerful about hearing someone else say the thing that you've been thinking and just realizing that you're not alone and that things can still be successfully built, even if you're experiencing these thoughts and these fears early on. As I go through each fear, I want to explore the fear. So, this like initial thought with you, and then the facts behind it, because this is exactly what I would do with you if we were working one on one together. So what better way to work one on one with all of you than through this? What I've learned through this is that fear sort of fills in the blanks of these worst case scenarios that we're thinking, right? And usually the antidote to that isn't necessarily like courage or bravery, but it's facts and data and information. So we want to look at what's actually true versus what our brain is just telling us at 11:30 at night when we are trying to peacefully fall asleep. So The fear that I want to start with is, let's start with the financial ones. Very common fear to have. The first fear that kept me up at night was the fear about taxes. I genuinely had no idea what I was doing with taxes. I had spent my entire career as a W 2 employee or working cash jobs, which meant that taxes just kind of happened to me and for me, right? They came out of my paycheck. I filed before April and I was done. And now I was staring down the reality of self employment. And with that, self employment taxes, quarterly payments, write offs, like all of these things that I had never dealt with before. And you almost feel like you like are accidentally in a class that you actually like aren't qualified to be in. My fear around this was like, I'm going to get this wrong. I'm going to owe money that I'm not going to have, and I'm going to go to jail, right? Actually, prison. I'm pretty sure it's federal crimes. But yeah, I'm going to go to prison for my taxes at some point because there is no way that I am going to be able to nail this, right? Here's the fact behind it that I reminded myself at that time and still have to continue to remind myself around April 15th to be totally transparent. Self employment taxes are completely learnable. They are one of the most predictable parts of your business once you start to understand the system around them. And a good accountant is one of the best business expenses you will spend because you don't have to figure it out alone. You don't have to figure it out before you start. And you just have to be willing to ask for help and put the right systems in place. The other really great thing, especially about bringing an accountant in early on, is they are very flexible with you your first year of self employment. So you don't have to pay quarterly taxes your first year of self employment. You are, really getting an idea of what your income is, what it's going to look like, what your write offs look like, what your deductions look like. And then you and your accountant will work together to figure out like what you need to do from there. But the fear that I had around this made taxes feel like this enormous, complicated trap that I was walking into. And the fact of the matter is, if we're looking at statistics, millions of self employed people navigate taxes every single year with so much support online. Accountants, CPAs. I often use Herd to clean up my books. I'll be sure to include a link in the show notes for that. And this is done over and over every single year without consequence and usually without much error. And this is really one of the parts of the business that very early on, I think it's great to find support in. Something that I'm often talking to therapists about early on is what is our weaknesses and what is something that we are hoping to hire out for. And accounting and a CPA is quite usually the top of the list and for good reason. Moving on to my second fear, probably in order, actually, is filling my caseload. Again, very common. So, what if I open my practice and nobody comes? What if I build this whole thing, pay for my PLLC, the website, my Psychology Today profile, and then I just sit there and nobody calls and nobody comes? This one is so common that I want to really highlight. Almost every therapist that I have talked to, again, has had this fear. And this is a big fear that keeps folks from starting. And I think part of why it's so persistent is because it's tied to something deeper than logistics, right? Around starting our practice. A lot of this fear is tied to our worth. What if I put myself out there and people don't choose me? What if I put myself out there and people don't come? Here's the fact. A full caseload in private practice is typically somewhere between 15 and 20 clients. 15 to 20 people out of an entire community, or if you're virtual, an entire state of people who need mental health support, who need exactly what you're offering, who are within the niche that you work with and would benefit from the approaches that you offer. That is buildable. And of course, it's not built by luck or magic or happenstance. It's built by very specific and concrete actions. by nailing your marketing, putting yourself out there, making sure you're networking, having a clear niche, being able to speak to your ideal client, all of the things to get people to notice you, recognize you, and excitedly want to work with you. So, in this, the fear is saying that no one will come. But the facts say that we don't need everybody to come, right? We just need 15 to 20 of the right people. And there is absolutely a roadmap for finding them, into getting them into our physical doors, virtual doors, and being able to help them and walk alongside them in their journey. This week's sponsor is so perfect in talking about our two biggest fears when starting up our practice financially and filling them, and that is Mentaya. Out of network, for a lot of therapists, those three words bring up a whole mix of feelings: confusion, hesitation, maybe some dread about the insurance conversation. But here's what most practitioners don't realize: it doesn't have to be that complicated, not anymore at least. Mentaya is a platform built specifically for out of network practitioners, and it does the hard part for you. Clients check their benefits instantly at intake. No phone calls with insurance, no guessing, no awkward back and forth. Then, Mentaya automatically submits claims after every session. You get paid your full rate and your client gets reimbursed. That's really it. If out of network has felt like too much work to figure out, this is your sign to take another look. You can try Mentaya for free for 30 days at mentaya.com using code TherapistHQ at signup. Mentaya, simpler than you think. Okay, our next category of fears is what I think of as the logistical fears. And these are the ones that are really about structure and systems, about whether you can hold it all together without someone else's infrastructure around you. So I know for me, my big one here was not having this agency to fall back on. No matter how much I disliked the agency or felt like the agency wasn't well run, of course, we still have that infrastructure to fall back on. When we work for an agency or community mental health, there's a whole system that are holding things in place around you. Again, whether they're doing it well or not, they're still holding that system. You often have a supervisor down the hall, you have HR, there's someone who handles billing and credentialing and all that back end stuff that we really don't have to think about. And when we leave that, when we're stepping out on our own, there's this moment where we realize that the net is gone. And that can feel a little scary because it's out of our norm, right? This is all new to us. So my fear was, what if something goes wrong and there's no one to catch me? But here's the fact: the safety net that we had, it doesn't disappear. It just sort of changes. So consultation groups exist, peer support communities exist, professional liability insurance exists, and communities just like the one that I have, which we will check in on at the end of this episode, exist specifically to make sure that you are not navigating this alone. The support looks different in private practice, but it is absolutely there if you seek it out. The other logistical fear I had was about managing my own schedule. Freedom, of course, was a huge motivator for me in starting my practice, and it sounds incredible at face value. We set our own hours, we decide when we work, we build our week around our life and not the other way around. And then we actually have a completely blank calendar and realize that sometimes freedom without structure feels like chaos. I worried that I would be terrible at this, that I would either overwork myself trying to fill every single slot because I was scared of losing income, or I would underwork myself and then panic about income. And to be honest, both of those things happened at various points in the beginning before I figured out what worked for me. But here is the fact behind it: you have already been managing a clinical caseload, documentation, treatment plan, crises for someone else's agency or practice. The organizational capacity that you need is something that you already have. What you're learning in private practice is not how to be organized, but it's how to apply that to your own business, which again is a very learnable skill. And because you're in private practice and you're not in that highly regulated agency world anymore, you don't need to be managing as much. the paperwork is less, the crises are less, the demands are less. You will actually be a bit overqualified, I think you'll find, when it comes to managing all of this. And so, the reframe that I want you to have if you are experiencing these logistical fears is to ask yourself whether you're afraid of the actual logistics or whether you're afraid of being responsible for them. Because those have two very different solutions, right? One is a knowledge gap and the other is a confidence gap. And knowing which one that you're dealing with matters. Moving on to the identity fears. How fun is that, right? These are the ones that I really didn't love to talk about because I think that they are just constantly evolving, right? And so a big one was networking with other therapists and just feeling like a fraud. I personally have struggled with imposter syndrome a lot throughout my career. It definitely ebbs and flows. And so I think it makes sense that these identity fears existed within this. I remember reaching out to therapists in my area when I was first starting out and trying to build a referral network, introduce myself, and just feeling this like almost sense of terror in myself every single time. They were going to see through me. They were somehow going to know that I actually wasn't a very confident clinician or confident in my business, and that the other therapists that I was talking to were somehow going to know that I didn't quite belong yet. So the fear was that they're going to think that I have no idea what I'm doing. Why would they refer clients to somebody like that? But the fact behind this is every single therapist that we admire, every person whose practice you look at and think, oh my gosh, I would love to have what they have. They sat exactly where you're sitting right now. The ones who look like they have it all figured out are not necessarily more qualified than you. They're not more worthy than you. They don't have more skills than you. They just started sooner. And the confidence that you see in them now is something that was absolutely built over time and not just something that they walked into the room with. And here's the other thing most therapists are genuinely rooting for each other. You cannot take Facebook groups as the base level for this, okay? The scarcity mindset, the idea that there aren't enough clients to go around, and so other therapists are your competition, that is just not the reality of this field. Most of the therapists that I have connected with over the years have been some of the most generous, supportive, incredible people I have ever encountered. And the fraud feeling that I was having was completely mine. It originated from me, it sat with me, and it was nobody else's. And so the reframe that I want you to hold on to with these identity kind of fears is to ask yourself, whose voice is this? Because the fear that you're a fraud, that you don't belong, that you're not experienced enough, and people are going to sort of discover this about you, that is almost never like an original thought that we're having. Someone somewhere planted that seed in us. It's almost like a culture that makes therapists feel like they have to earn the right to have their own practice, like a training environment that it is equating like confidence with arrogance. Like you're not allowed to be confident because that is going to show up as arrogance, or even these comparisons with someone who's further along in the journey than you are. But you get to decide whether you keep watering that seed of a thought or whether we put it down. Okay, deep breath. We have walked through the fears, financial fears, logistical fears, identity fears. And as promised, I want to give you a little bit of a tool. So, this is a fear inventory, and I want you to actually do this with yourself and with your fears, or to just save this episode and come back to it when you feel these fears creeping in. So, you're going to grab your phone or a journal, a notes app, whatever you have within reach. And I want you to write down the fear that's been sitting with you the most as you've been listening to this episode. Maybe you identify with something that I shared about myself, or maybe you keep having this thought of a repetitive fear that you are having. So just pick one of them, maybe the loudest one. Now I want you to ask yourself 3 questions. The first is, which bucket does this fear live in? Is it financial? Is it logistical? Is it about your identity? Because the way that you work through a money fear is going to be different from the way that you work through an imposter syndrome fear. And so knowing which one you're dealing with is the first step. Second, I want you to think about, what is this fear actually saying? And is it true? Not, is it possible? Not could it theoretically happen in a worst case scenario, but is it actually factually true right now? Because fear has a really good way of filling in the blanks, and it takes uncertainty and it can turn it into our inner monologue or into a story. And sometimes that story or that monologue has very little to do with what's actually happening. And finally, third, what is one thing I could do this week that would give me real information instead of letting the fear fill in the blanks? Because that is the move, not waiting until the fear goes away because it could get smaller, but the idea of the fear, going away overnight, it probably just won't. But we want to get data. We want to take one small action that gives you something real to work with instead of just the story that our brain is telling us. The fear is not a sign that you're not ready. It's a sign that this matters to you. And I like that so much that I had to say it twice in this episode. And despite the fear, you deserve to do it anyway. Okay, my friends. We made it through the heavy stuff, right? So I want to, of course, end today's episode with my favorite, which is therapist in the threads. It's when I go into the threads of Reddit, find a thread that has to do with what we've talked about today, and we just chat about it. So this was posted in r/therapist 3 years ago, and it's titled Terrified of Private Practice. How fitting, right? And the user writes, so I can see based on the post that I'm not the only therapist here with anxiety or even dread about my upcoming workday. But recently I've decided that I've built up enough of a private practice on the side that I want to do it full time. I'm about to tell my boss, and now I'm in a complete state of panic. I'm working on this in my own therapy, but I guess it's the idea of supporting myself financially based on my ability to help and maintain clients. And then there's the fact if I do help them and they leave, I have new ones and I have to be anxious about not knowing them and what they'll think of me and how well we'll work together. I have been crying off and on all day, and I guess I just want to ask how others have dealt with these things if you have experienced anything similar. Does it get better? I know it's time for me to move on from the monotony and stress of community mental health, but even there, I avoided seeing a full caseload of client, fearing I couldn't handle it. The first commenter says, community mental health clients aren't private practice clients. Paperwork isn't the same. The issues are less acute. And best of all, you get to choose who you're working with. There's a high level of autonomy and functionality that goes along with being able to afford private practice rates or do what you got to do to maintain a job with insurance. You got this. And I agree, it's your anxiety that's holding you back. It's not that hard. Just be a person talking to another person. I love that. The next commenter says, I've been in private practice since 2017 and it is so great. You will love it. In my experience, the people stay much longer. There is a steady flow. And it's just not the same as dealing with emergencies all the time. I totally understand that this is scary, but I think it would be way worse not to do it. Have you tried Tim Ferriss's fear setting exercise? Check it out. It could help with the anxiety around this. I love it. Love it. Okay, we are going to read one more comment because I really like this one too. This commenter says, I've been in private practice for several years and I love it. If you've built up enough of a practice on the side, then that right there is proof that you can build and maintain a caseload. Private practice is a bit risky, but there's also greater potential reward in terms of satisfaction, effectiveness as a therapist, ability to specialize in something you love, and income. It's normal to feel like you don't know what you're doing when you're new at it, but we all build confidence by doing. You'll get more and more confident the more experience you get. If you are really worried, you could maybe sign up with another company or get a part-time job or just to have something on the back burner. If you take a leap, it might light a fire under your butt to get good at marketing and networking and clinical skills, which could be a good thing. Also, clients can think whatever they want about you. Some will like you and some won't. Just stay grounded in your intentions to help people. Do your best, be human, and refer out if needed. You've got this. How amazing is that? I feel like those are all very real thoughts that we have all had, or maybe someone out there is continuing to have throughout their journey. All right, before we close out today, I just want to make sure that you know about the two ways that I can support you beyond this podcast. If you're in this early stage thinking about launching or getting started, the Complete Launch Kit was built for exactly where you are. It's a step by step course with 65 lessons that walks you through everything: forming your LLC, setting your rates, getting your systems in place, building your marketing foundation, and seeing your first client without piecing it together from Google or Reddit threads. Everything you need in one place in the right order. And you can grab that at Therapist HQ/launch kit. I will also add that in the show notes. And if you're already practicing, but your marketing feels inconsistent or honestly non existent, that is what the HQ community is for. It's a done for you marketing system designed specifically for private practice therapists. Every single week, you get social media prompts and blog post prompts, so you always know what to post. Every month, there are expert trainings that you can dive into. It's a library of expert trainings. And I can personally review your website and direct your profiles and send you written feedback at any time. You also get access to the HQ GPT, which is an AI tool built specifically for private practice marketing that can turn a prompt into a polished caption, blog post, or newsletter in minutes. All of that for $37 a month. You can find it in the show notes as well. Okay, my friends, that is all I have for today. And I will see you all next week. Take care of yourselves and your business.